She froze in the doorway like she'd just seen a ghost. Her hand still gripped the handle, and for a second I wondered if she was going to shut the door and pretend it never happened. Her eyes locked on the nameplate, bold, clean, metallic. Kaya Marin, creative director. Her lips parted. No words came out. I just smiled. That was the moment. That was the instant everything shifted. You know how sometimes you fantasize about what you'd say if you ever got the chance to confront the person who hurt you? You write the speech in your head over and over. You imagine them stunned, maybe even apologizing. But when it actually happens, when your moment finally arrives, you don't need to say a word. Because the truth is already written. On the door, on your face, in the silence between you. The look on my sister's face, confusion, disbelief, embarrassment. It was better than any speech I could have given. She hadn't even knocked. She just barged in like she always did when we were kids. Only this time she wasn't walking into my bedroom to borrow a shirt without asking. She was walking into my office. And I wasn't just her sister anymore. I was her boss. But let's rewind. Because this moment, this delicious, poetic moment, didn't come out of nowhere. It was built out of years of being dismissed, overlooked, betrayed. And it all started the day she stole my idea and got promoted for it. Yeah, my own sister. Let me be clear, I'm not here to play the victim. I'm here to tell the truth, the kind that gets buried in families like mine. The kind people call drama because it makes them uncomfortable. But this story, it's real. And for anyone who's ever been told to just be happy for her while swallowing your own rage, this is for you. My name is Kaya Marin. I'm 32. I live in Austin, and I've worked in marketing and brand development for almost a decade. I'm the quiet one in my family, the planner, the fixer, the one who shows up early and leaves late. My younger sister Zara? She's the opposite. Loud, charming, walks into a room and makes people laugh. People love her instantly, including our parents, especially our parents. Growing up, she could crash the car and still get dessert. I could get straight A's and be asked, "Why isn't your room clean?" But I never held it against her. I thought that's just how families were. Uneven, a little unfair, but still loyal at the end of the day. I didn't realize loyalty could be a one-way street. When I started working on that campaign, the one that changed everything, I was pouring everything into it. Late nights, vision boards, market research. This pitch was personal. I believed in it, and I knew it could take me to the next level. And for some reason, maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope, I shared it with Zara. We were having brunch. She was complaining about her job, and I was trying to be supportive. I thought, maybe she'll be proud of me. Maybe she'll see how hard I work. She listened, smiled, nodded like she always does. Said it sounded cool. I should have known then. 3 weeks later, my manager called an emergency meeting to congratulate the brilliant mind behind the bold new campaign coming from Zara's department. It was mine. Word for word, slide for slide. She didn't even bother changing the font. And the worst part? When I confronted her, she laughed. Said, "We're family. What's mine is yours, right?" Right. Then our parents threw her a party for her promotion. And when I said I didn't feel like celebrating, they told me to stop being dramatic. Be happy for her. She deserves this. I stayed quiet. I stayed quiet all the way through the party, the toast, the fake smiles. But inside, something started burning. That fire. It didn't go out. It got hotter, sharper. It became the thing that pushed me, that woke me up. And it led me straight to this moment, her in my office. Me at the desk. The name on the door. Now she was the one who had to stay quiet. And I had just begun to speak. Before everything blew up, I had a simple life. Quiet. Focused. Structured, maybe to a fault. I lived alone in a modest condo on the east side of Austin, surrounded by plants I actually kept alive and books with folded corners. I liked routines. Early mornings, playlists with no lyrics, black coffee and checking email before the world was fully awake. I wasn't chasing luxury or attention, just progress. Just peace. My job wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I worked as a brand strategist for a tech company called VerityWorks. We weren't Apple or Google, but we were making waves in AI-driven consumer design, and I had finally carved out a role where I could be creative and analytical, where people listened when I spoke, where my voice had value. Outside of work, I didn't have a huge social life. I had a few close friends, real ones, the kind who didn't compete with you or ask you to dim yourself to fit in. I'd meet them for dinner on Fridays, where we'd decompress over tacos and margaritas, and talk about dreams like buying land in New Mexico or quitting tech to open a coffee shop. They knew me, the real me. And then there was my family. The complicated part. We weren't distant, not in the literal sense. We talked, texted, had dinners every other Sunday. But emotionally, there was always space between us. A kind of invisible script I was expected to follow. Show up, smile, don't rock the boat. My mom, Diana, is the kind of woman who hosts book clubs, but never finishes the book. She's sharp, image-conscious, and obsessed with how things look to others. My father, Greg, is quieter, polite, pragmatic, but only when it's convenient. He doesn't believe in conflict. If something's uncomfortable, he avoids it. He's always been that way. And then there's her, Zara Marin, my younger sister by 3 years, my parents' favorite person on earth. Zara has always been the golden one. It's not just that she's beautiful, although she is, in that effortlessly photogenic way. It's that she knows how to perform, how to charm, how to take up space without ever seeming like she's asking for it. When we were kids, she could throw a tantrum, and somehow I'd get in trouble for it. If she missed curfew, it was because she was finding herself. If I came home early, I was boring. Zara never really had to figure life out, not the way I did. After college, my parents pulled strings to get her into a flashy marketing role at a partner firm where she could discover her passion. Meanwhile, I was grinding through unpaid internships, working double shifts to get noticed, and paying off student loans on my own. But I didn't envy her. I really didn't. I figured we just had different paths. I told myself it didn't matter if our parents favored her, that my worth didn't depend on their applause. I kept my head down and did the work. Still, no matter how far I got, I always ended up being Zara's sister. At family events, I was asked about her career more than my own. At holidays, my parents fawned over the influencer collabs she was trying to land. I'd show up in a nice dress, holding a homemade dessert, and somehow still feel like the assistant to her success. But I held my tongue. Because I believed in keeping peace. Because I thought loyalty meant swallowing disappointment. Because I thought if I kept showing up, if I kept achieving, someone would finally see me. Someone would finally say, "Kaya, we're proud of you." They didn't. But I kept going. Because I had something Zara didn't. Drive. Not ambition for attention, but purpose. I loved creating things that made sense. I loved solving puzzles in brand identity, helping companies tell a story that actually connected. And after 5 years of hard work, I was finally getting noticed at VerityWorks. So when I was assigned to develop a campaign for a potential Fortune 500 partnership, one that could double our visibility, I took it seriously. It wasn't just a project. It was mine. At the time, I had no idea that sharing a few ideas over brunch would destroy the illusion of trust I'd worked my whole life to preserve. But I'll get to that. Back then, I still believed family meant something. I still believed my sister loved me enough not to betray me. I still believed I was safe. Some families fight loud. Mine fought in silence, in smiles that didn't reach the eyes, in praise given in one direction, and in expectations that only applied to me. The dysfunction in my family wasn't dramatic in the way people expect when they hear a story like this. It didn't come with screaming matches or police visits. It came in subtler forms, favoritism dressed as concern, invalidation disguised as advice, betrayal framed as support. I grew up in a house where everything looked perfect from the outside. Suburban charm, white shutters, coordinated family photos every year. We were the kind of family other people pointed to and said, "Wow, they really have it together." We didn't. From the time I was old enough to understand language, I was also old enough to understand who mattered more. Zara was the golden child. That wasn't just a feeling, it was a fact, repeated in 1,000 little moments. If she wanted to quit soccer, it was because sports weren't her passion. When I wanted to quit piano because I was overwhelmed with schoolwork, I was told not to be lazy. If she needed help with a paper, Mom would stay up proofreading it with her until 1 a.m. I once brought home an essay I was proud of, and my mom said, "It's a little dry. You should ask Zara for help. She's more creative." It was always like that. Zara could say or do nearly anything, and there was a net waiting to catch her. I was the net. And no one ever checked if I was falling. I was the one who had to apologize first. The one who had to compromise. The one who was expected to understand, because I was the mature one, the level-headed one, the one who knew better. But being the responsible one doesn't mean you're invincible. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It just means your feelings don't make the priority list. When I got accepted into my university, on scholarship, my mom barely looked up from her phone. She just said, "That's great, sweetie. Do you know if Zara can transfer there?" When I was promoted to lead my first team project, my dad's only comment was, "Is that going to stress you out too much? You already work long hours." But when Zara got a part-time internship at a PR firm through a friend of Mom's, they bought her a new laptop and threw a dinner in her honor. I remember that night vividly. The table was decorated with gold confetti. There was a cake, balloons. Our parents stood to make toasts. "Zara's got this light in her," my dad said. "She's got something special. We always knew." I stood in the corner holding a plate I didn't want to eat from, wondering if I'd imagined the hundreds of nights I'd spent pushing myself to the edge just to be noticed, and every time I tried to talk about it, even gently, I was shut down. Don't compare yourself to your sister. Zara needs more support. You're stronger. You're just taking things too personally. Eventually, I stopped talking. I stopped asking for recognition. I convinced myself that being seen wasn't as important as being useful. So I became useful. I became the one who could hold everything together. But something happens when you're the one who always holds things. People start to believe that you don't need anything in return. Not attention, not credit, not protection. And over time, you begin to believe it too. Until someone crosses a line so clearly, so shamelessly, that you realize, no, this isn't normal. This isn't love. This is a system where only one person gets to shine. And you were never meant to. So yes, there were cracks long before she stole my idea. That wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment I stopped pretending I couldn't feel them. It was supposed to be a normal brunch. Just me and Zara at this trendy little cafe near South Congress. We sat on the patio. She ordered some overpriced smoothie with bee pollen. I got my usual black coffee and eggs with no frills. She was in one of her reflective moods, talking about how stuck she felt at work, how uninspired she was, how nobody in her department respected her ideas. I nodded, listened. That's what I did in our family. Absorb everyone's worries, filter them, offer suggestions. "I feel like people just see me as decoration," she said, twirling her straw. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because I wanted to feel close. Maybe because I thought this was a turning point where we'd finally stop being rivals and start being sisters. So I told her. I told her about the campaign I'd been developing in secret, a bold rebranding strategy for a national lifestyle company that was exploring a tech partnership with us. It wasn't assigned to me directly. I'd volunteered to take a shot at it after my team lead mentioned we needed something fresh. I had been working on it late at night, off the clock, pouring everything I had into this idea. I saw the whole thing clearly. The messaging, the visual identity, the launch narrative. A campaign that would flip the old model on its head and tell a story people actually wanted to believe in. So I shared it. Not everything, but enough. I walked her through the concept, the theme, the angle that would make it resonate with our generation. I even joked, "This is the one. If they pick this, I might actually move out of my job title and into something bigger." She smiled, said it sounded really cool, asked a few questions, mostly vague. She didn't write anything down, but she was definitely paying attention. I remember thinking, maybe she's proud of me. A week later, there was a buzz at work. Word spread that a team in another department had pitched a killer campaign concept for the same brand, and that leadership loved it. I didn't think anything of it at first. I was still finalizing my own pitch deck, planning to submit it by the end of the week. Then I got the company-wide email. Zara's name, front and center. Congratulations to Zara Marin for presenting one of the boldest campaign concepts we've seen this quarter. A game-changer in storytelling and market relevance. I opened the attached presentation out of curiosity, maybe to support her, maybe because something didn't sit right. And there it was. My idea. Not inspired by it, not similar to it, identical. Same title, same campaign slogan, same demographic pivot and storytelling arc. Even the emotional hook I had crafted so carefully. She had copied it word for word. She didn't even bother changing the color scheme. I stared at the screen, my fingers frozen on the mousepad. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't believe it. I thought, there has to be some mistake. She wouldn't do that to me. But she did. She took my work, my thoughts, my effort, my voice, and she called it hers. I went home that night and sat in the dark. Not crying, just stunned, hollow, like someone had reached inside me and pulled out the part that still believed we were family. And then, 2 days later, my parents called. "We're throwing Zara a party!" My mom chirped, like it was Christmas morning. "She's finally being recognized for her creativity. You're coming, right?" I didn't answer. She went on. "This could really launch her career. It's a big deal." And then came the line that still stings when I think about it. "Kaya, just be happy for her." Not, "How are you feeling?" Not, "That seems unfair." Not even, "Are you okay?" Just, be happy for her. I sat there on the phone, nodding silently like I always did, pretending like my stomach wasn't twisted in knots, pretending that my chest wasn't burning from something I couldn't name yet. Betrayal, yes, but also something worse. Erasure. I had always feared being invisible in my own family. That day, I realized I already was. They didn't just ignore what she'd done. They celebrated it. After the party, I stopped talking. Not out loud. I still went to work, replied to emails, answered when people spoke to me. But something inside me shut off. Like someone had flipped a switch and dimmed all the lights in my chest. I showed up to Zara's celebration because I didn't know how not to. I walked into my parents' house, holding a bottle of wine I'd grabbed at the last minute. Not because I wanted to celebrate her, but because I didn't want to be accused of being bitter. Everything was glittery and loud. Gold balloons, champagne, Zara in a white blazer like she was launching a brand instead of just stealing one. Everyone clapped when she walked in. My mom gave a speech. My dad clinked a glass and said, "We always knew she was destined for something bigger." I stood in the back near the kitchen, pretending to scroll through emails. No one asked what I was working on. No one even brought up the fact that the campaign Zara was being praised for had come from my department. From me. I thought maybe someone would notice. That someone would say, "Wait, didn't Kaya mention something like that?" But they didn't. Because I had made myself small for so long that even when someone else wore my skin, no one recognized it was missing. I went home early. No one stopped me. The next morning, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen for almost 20 minutes. My campaign file was still there. Still mine. Still untouched. But now it felt like a ghost. Like a story someone else had already told and gotten credit for. For the first time in years, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Work became mechanical. I showed up. I smiled in meetings. I turned in deliverables on time. But my spark, the thing that made me love what I did, was gone. I'd walk into a room and feel hollow, like a placeholder for someone else's success. And it wasn't just about the project anymore. It was the look on my mom's face when Zara gave her little thank you speech at the party. That pride, the kind that had never once landed on me, no matter how hard I tried. It was the silence from my dad, who later told me I was reading too much into things. It was the way Zara hugged me at the end of the night and whispered, "You know I love you, right?" I said nothing. Because what do you say to someone who claims love while cutting you open? At work, I avoided the team Zara was on. I avoided her entirely. She texted me once, "Are you mad?" I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I didn't respond, and that made me feel guilty, as if her betrayal was something I still had to manage. The gaslighting didn't end with her either. My mom called a week later and said, "Zara told me you're upset. Honey, don't be dramatic. It's just work. You both work in marketing. Ideas overlap." It was like being told the sky wasn't blue. Like watching someone burn your house down while they handed you a hose with no water and said, "Come on, be reasonable." I started having trouble sleeping. My mind kept replaying the moment I realized she'd stolen my idea. The way my heart had dropped. The way I kept questioning myself afterward. Was I overreacting? Did I somehow give her permission? It was madness, and I felt completely alone in it. My friends noticed. Marissa, my closest friend from college, texted, "You've been quiet lately. Are you okay?" I typed, "Yeah, just busy." Then deleted it, then typed, "It's Zara." She took something from me. "I'm not okay." She called immediately. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "You didn't deserve that. I see you. I always have." I cried for the first time that night. The kind of cry where your body aches afterward, not just because of what happened, but because of how long I had carried it. It wasn't just this one betrayal. It was all the moments before it, all the times I'd been told to stay quiet, to be the bigger person, to not make things harder for Zara. All the years of disappearing, quietly, politely, so she could shine. And for what? So she could take the one thing I built for myself and call it hers? Something had to change. Not with them, they wouldn't change. But me? I was done being invisible. Something changed after that night I broke down on the phone with Marissa. Not dramatically. I didn't cut my hair or quit my job or post some cryptic quote on social media. But deep inside me, something shifted. A quiet shift, like the earth turning under your feet. You don't always feel it right away, but one morning you wake up and realize the view has changed. That shift started with one simple question I wrote in my journal. What would happen if I stopped shrinking? It came out of nowhere. I didn't plan it. I was just sitting on my couch, hair messy, still in pajamas, a cold mug of coffee on the table, and I picked up a pen and started writing. I didn't even recognize my own handwriting at first. It felt so shaky. But once I started, I couldn't stop. Pages spilled out, not rage, but clarity. I wrote about the countless times I'd let things slide in the name of keeping peace. I wrote about how I'd been raised to believe that being low maintenance was a virtue, that being too much would make people leave. I wrote about every time I'd made myself invisible to protect people who wouldn't have noticed if I'd disappeared completely. And I realized something that left me breathless. I had built a life, my entire emotional identity, around being easier to love. Not because I wanted to be small, but because I thought that was the only way I'd be allowed to exist at all. The betrayal with Zara had hurt so much, not just because she stole from me, but because it forced me to confront the truth. I had made silence my personality, and it had never kept me safe. So, I made a choice. Nothing huge, just intentional. I started therapy again. Real therapy. Not the polite kind where you pretend everything's just been a little stressful. I told the truth in that room. All of it. And for the first time in my life, someone looked back at me and said, "You deserved better. You don't have to prove pain to be allowed to feel it." That sentence sat in my chest for days. I went back to work differently. Still quiet, but no longer passive. I started speaking up in meetings again. I took ownership of my current projects. I volunteered for stretch assignments, not to prove something, but to take up space. Because I was tired of letting other people decide whether or not I was worthy. One morning I walked into my boss's office and said, "I want to be considered for the upcoming leadership position." She looked surprised. "You'd be perfect for it. I just didn't think you were interested." I was. I am. I just hadn't said it before. Why? Because I was always taught that asking for something was selfish. That being too proud made you look bad. That ambition wasn't nice. That success belonged to people who were louder, shinier, easier to love. Zara had never hesitated to take what she wanted, even when it wasn't hers. So maybe the lesson wasn't to become like her, but to stop giving her everything I'd been afraid to claim for myself. I started setting boundaries with my parents. Nothing dramatic. I just stopped performing. If I didn't want to come to dinner, I said no. When my mom called and started talking about Zara's newest achievement, I didn't ask follow-up questions. I let the silence stretch. I let her feel what it was like when I stopped being the emotional buffer. I started choosing me. And little by little, things started opening up. I had more energy, more clarity. I began sleeping better. I felt pride again, not in things that others applauded, but in the quiet victories no one saw. Saying no, finishing my work without over-explaining, reclaiming joy in small things like cooking, or walking without headphones, or hearing my own thoughts without shrinking from them. I didn't confront Zara. Not yet. Because I had nothing to prove to her. This part of my healing? It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't to win. It was to remind myself that I existed, that I mattered, that I could take up space in my own life, fully, loudly, unapologetically. And one day soon, I would take back more than just space. I'd take back my name. After years of being told to be patient, to be mature, to let things go, I decided to stop waiting for fairness to arrive, like a delivery I never ordered. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to move. In silence. With precision. Because what they don't tell you is, sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't rage. It's results. By this point, I had spent weeks rebuilding my confidence. Not overnight, but hour by hour. Journaling, therapy, unlearning decades of programmed silence. I'd begun showing up differently in meetings, pitching new projects, and saying what I actually thought, not just what I thought people wanted to hear. And people noticed, not in a fireworks kind of way, more like a ripple. My manager started giving me higher visibility assignments. I was asked to speak in a strategy roundtable. One colleague pulled me aside and said, "You're stepping into something, Kaya. You're leading." For once, I didn't deflect the compliment. I said, "Thank you." It felt small, but it was huge. That's when I saw the job listing. Creative Director, Strategic Brand Team, VerityWorks South Division. It was a new internal role. Different office, same company. A position with real authority, creative control, and, most importantly, the power to direct campaigns like the one Zara stole. At first, I hesitated. Not because I wasn't qualified. I knew I was. But a tiny voice still whispered, "Is this too much? Will they think you're overreaching? Will your family see it as a slap in the face?" Then I thought, since when did their comfort come before my future? I submitted my application that night. No announcement, no fanfare. I didn't even tell Marissa. I wanted to do this for me, not for praise, not for proof, not for validation. Just to step into what I already knew I had earned. A week later, I got the interview. It was intense. I prepped for days. I poured my heart into it, not as a performance, but as a declaration of fact. I belonged here. I was ready. I had the experience, the vision, and the resilience to lead. And then came the call. I got it. The promotion, the title, the role. Creative Director, VerityWorks South. I hung up the phone and sat still for a long time. No tears, no shouting. Just a quiet sense of arrival. Like I had finally walked back into a room I'd been standing outside of my entire life. But the story didn't end there. A week before I started the new role, I got an email from HR. As part of company-wide restructuring, a few team members from my old department were being reassigned under my new team. One would be hired on as a support lead, essentially my assistant. I opened the document. Zara Marin. My heart stopped. Not in panic, in disbelief. The kind that makes you laugh under your breath, like there's no way this is real. But it was. She had been reassigned under me. I reread the email twice. It was clear. She would report to me directly, assist with brand initiatives, coordinate creative deliverables, attend strategy meetings, my meetings. I stared at the screen, stunned. This wasn't a setup. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't even known she was being moved. But somehow the universe had drawn a perfect, brutal circle. I didn't reply to the HR email immediately. I sat with it, let the reality soak in. Zara, the same person who had stolen my idea, who had laughed when I confronted her, who had been celebrated while I was erased, would soon walk into my office and see my name on the door. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel rage. I felt ready, because I hadn't taken anything from her. I hadn't lied. I hadn't schemed. I had simply risen, one choice at a time, while she coasted on charm and shortcuts. And now, without a single confrontation, I had arrived at a place where the truth would speak for itself. No more justifying, no more shrinking, no more playing nice while being stabbed in the back. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for my seat at the table. And she was about to find out. I set the table now. There are moments that change you in an instant, not because of what's said, but because of what can't be unsaid. For me, that moment started at exactly 9:03 a.m. on a Wednesday. I had just finished adjusting the blinds in my new office. The light came in soft, golden. My nameplate had arrived the day before, clean and crisp on the door. Kaya Marin, creative director. I hadn't told anyone in my family about the promotion. I hadn't posted it online. I didn't owe anyone a performance. I just wanted to exist in this moment, without fanfare, without asking for permission. That was when I heard the knock. Except, she didn't wait. The door swung open like she owned the place, and there she was. Zara, wearing one of her perfectly styled blazers, Starbucks cup in hand, phone tucked under her arm. She looked like she expected to be greeted by someone important, someone she could impress. Instead, she stopped mid-step. Her eyes landed on the plaque, then on me. And for once in her life, she had nothing to say. I watched the color drain from her face as she blinked, looked at the desk, the nameplate, the framed certificate on the wall. She took a shaky breath and managed to half laugh. "Wait, what?" she said. "This is your office?" I met her eyes, steady, calm. "Yes, it is." She gave a stunned laugh, the kind you do when you're still trying to process what's happening. "You're the new director?" "I am." The silence that followed was sharp, like glass. I could see her mind racing, trying to recalculate her place in the world, now that the one person she thought would always stay beneath her wasn't. "You didn't tell me," she said, voice thinner now. "You didn't say anything?" "You didn't ask," I replied. I sat down at my desk. I didn't invite her to sit. I didn't ask how she was doing. She stood there, still holding her coffee like a shield, and said, "This is awkward." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "We're both professionals. You're here to assist on my team. That's what we'll do." And that's when her composure cracked. "Kaya, come on. Are you really going to act like this?" Her tone sharpened. "Like we're strangers? We're sisters." I finally looked up, really looked at her. The same face I'd grown up watching steal all the attention in every room, now flickering with something unfamiliar. Insecurity. "Zara," I said carefully, "you stole my work." "Lied about it. Got rewarded for it. And when I told you how much that hurt, you laughed." Her mouth opened, but I didn't stop. "You told me it wasn't a big deal. Then you let our parents throw you a party for it. You never once apologized. You never once gave credit. You let me disappear so you could shine." She swallowed, hard. "I didn't know you were that upset." "You did know. You just didn't care." That stopped her. For a second, the mask slipped. No charm, no smirk, just the weight of everything she'd refused to acknowledge. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it wide. "You'll get the onboarding documents from HR this afternoon," I said evenly. "You can use the shared desk outside this office. Welcome to the team." She didn't move at first. I saw the panic rise behind her eyes, the realization that the power she thought she had, the unspoken hierarchy we grew up living under, didn't apply here. Not anymore. Because this space, I built it, and I wasn't giving any of it back. Zara walked out slowly, silent. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I took a deep breath and let it fill every part of me. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel mean. I didn't feel like the villain in her version of the story. I just felt free. Because truth doesn't always need volume. Sometimes all it needs is a door with your name on it, and someone finally realizing they can't walk through it like they used to. 2 months after Zara walked into my office and realized the world had shifted, I stood on a stage of my own. Not by accident, not by default, and not in someone else's shadow. It was the annual Verity Work Summit, a major industry event our company hosted each year, drawing leaders from tech, design, marketing, and innovation. Each department nominated one speaker to present their flagship campaign, showcase achievements, and represent the brand's evolving direction. This year, I was nominated. And not just nominated. Selected unanimously. I'd led my team, through the successful launch of a cross-brand storytelling campaign that hit every benchmark, and then some. A campaign I had conceived, built, and delivered with integrity and without shortcuts. The feedback had been extraordinary. Engagement metrics, user retention, brand affinity, all climbing. But more than that, people saw me. Not just for the work, for the way I led, the way I created space for others, the way I claimed space for myself without apology. The morning of the summit, I wore a tailored black suit. Nothing flashy, but I felt like armor. Not to protect me, to remind me I didn't need protection anymore. I stood backstage, waiting for the cue, holding my notes in one hand. My other hand? Steady. No shaking. I had rehearsed the speech. I'd gone over every word. But I knew what mattered most wasn't the script. It was the presence, the fact that I was here at all. The MC's voice echoed through the auditorium. "Please welcome Kaya Marin, Creative Director of Verity Works South, the mind behind one of our most transformative campaigns to date." Applause, lights, movement. I stepped forward. Not rushed, not timid, rooted. As I reached the podium, I glanced at the audience. It was a sea of faces, some familiar, some not. And in the third row, I saw her, Zara, sitting still. No smile, no camera raised, just watching. I didn't flinch. I didn't let her presence shake me. I spoke about the campaign, the strategy, the message, the research behind our creative choices. But then I paused. I looked out at the crowd and I said, every story we build is about identity, belonging, visibility. It's about taking the parts of ourselves that have been overlooked, misunderstood, or stolen, and choosing to make them seen. For a long time, I made myself small. I thought shrinking was the same as surviving. I thought silence was safer. But the truth is, your voice doesn't disappear just because others refuse to hear it. You don't lose your vision just because someone else wears it louder. You don't have to scream to be powerful. Sometimes power looks like clarity, like standing here, knowing I didn't steal the spotlight. I built the stage. The audience was silent. Then, a burst of applause. Not polite. Real. That sound filled a part of me I didn't know had been echoing for years. I ended my talk and walked off stage feeling more grounded than I ever had before. Not because I had won anything, but because I had arrived, fully, on my terms. Zara didn't approach me afterward. She slipped out before the reception. And honestly, that was fine. I didn't need an apology anymore. Her silence was no longer a weight on my back. It was just a reminder of what I had outgrown. Later that evening, my team surprised me with a small after-party. Nothing grand, just drinks, music, and laughter in a rooftop bar overlooking the city. My name was on the invitation, celebrating Kaya Marin. Voice, vision, victory. I stood there with a drink in my hand, surrounded by people who respected me not for being agreeable or invisible, but for being honest, capable, and unapologetically present. I had earned everything she once took credit for. Only now it came with my name, and no one else's. After the summit, something inside me settled. Not in a mission accomplished kind of way. I wasn't chasing a finish line. It was deeper than that. A sense of groundedness, of no longer waiting for permission to feel proud, or loved, or seen. And what surprised me most was who reached out. It wasn't my parents. They sent a casual congrats text 2 days later. No emojis, no phone call, no mention of the speech or Zara being there. Just surface, polite, like someone sending a message to a coworker after a LinkedIn promotion. But I didn't feel the familiar ache this time, because other people did show up, people who mattered. Marissa, my best friend, called me as soon as she saw the summit stream online. "You're fire," she said. "I don't even have other words. I watched it 3 times. You walked up there like a damn hurricane in heels." We laughed. We cried. She told me, "You don't even realize how many women needed to hear that today." Later that week, my colleague Hannah, one of the newer hires who had started as an intern, stopped by my office and said, "You being in this role makes me feel like I belong in this industry. You're not loud, and you're not fake, and you don't shrink to fit anyone. That means something." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. Not the professional kind. The real kind, tight, grateful, heart first. These were the people who saw me. Not because I begged to be seen. Not because I twisted myself into something they wanted, but because I showed up honestly, and they respected that. Then, one night, out of nowhere, my Uncle Ray called. He's my mom's older brother. Quiet man. Doesn't get involved in family drama. I hadn't heard from him in nearly a year. "I watched your speech," he said. I sat up straighter. "You did?" "Yeah. Someone forwarded it to me. I listened twice. You've always had something strong in you, Kaya. They just didn't want to look at it." There was a long pause before he added, "I'm sorry they didn't protect you better. I should have said something a long time ago." And I swear something in me cracked open. Not because I needed him to rescue me, but because someone in my bloodline finally told the truth. "I'm proud of you," he said. "And if you ever need anything, I'm here." That was the first time I ever heard those words from someone in my family where it felt real. No strings, no condescension, just support. The next weekend, I invited a few friends and coworkers over for dinner. Nothing big, just music, wine, laughter, and stories. As we sat on the patio, watching the sun sink over the rooftops, I looked around and realized, this is family. Not the kind you're born into. The kind you build. The ones who root for you when there's no spotlight. Who clap even when no one else is looking. Who call you out, hold you up, and remind you you're not alone. Not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. For so long, I had tried to be what my family wanted. Small, soft, uncomplaining. But it turns out I didn't need to be anything other than myself. And the people who mattered? They didn't just accept that. They celebrated it. In their eyes, I wasn't second best. I wasn't Zara's sister. I wasn't too quiet, too intense, too much. I was just Kaya. And that was finally enough. I used to think truth needed to be whispered, or sugar-coated, or framed just right so people wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But sometimes the truth needs to be loud. Sometimes it needs to sit in the center of the table where everyone can see it. Undeniable, unflinching. And that day came sooner than I expected. It started with a routine HR meeting. Zara had been under my team for about 6 weeks by then, and it wasn't going well. Not in the dramatic way people might expect. There was no outburst, no confrontation. But the work told its own story. She missed deadlines. blamed teammates for tasks she had dropped, forwarded incomplete drafts with my name copied in, hoping someone else would fix it before I noticed. I gave her room to grow. I offered support, but I didn't cover for her. Not this time. One morning, I submitted a formal performance review, objective, professional, specific, and I thought that would be the end of it. But HR had already started looking into complaints from other departments, unrelated to mine, and yet so familiar. Patterns of taking credit for others' ideas, withholding information, creating conflict, then playing the victim when confronted. Sounded like a greatest hits album of my childhood. A week later, they launched an internal audit. A few people reached out privately and shared their stories, some small, some painful. One coworker said, "I wanted to say something for months, but I thought no one would believe me." She always knows what to say in front of the right people. I did too, for years, but now the veil was lifting, not just from her, but from my parents too. The audit wasn't public, but word got around, and people started seeing Zara differently, not with hatred, just clarity. The way people look at a polished vase and finally notice the cracks. One Saturday, I got a text from my mother. "Mom, I heard Zara's having a hard time at work. She told me you're making it difficult for her. Is that true?" I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to defend myself, explain, soften it. But I didn't. Instead, I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Kaya, I don't know what's going on between you two, but..." "Mom," I said. "Stop." She went quiet. "I've let you rewrite this story for years. I've let you pretend it was harmless when you chose her over and over, but I'm done playing that part. Kaya, she stole my work, lied about it, got rewarded for it, and you knew, and you still celebrated her while asking me to be happy for her." Her voice was brittle. "That's not fair." What's not fair is raising 2 daughters and only ever making space for one. What's not fair is making me feel like speaking up was a betrayal, when the real betrayal was your silence. She didn't say anything. I continued calmly. She's being held accountable, not punished, not attacked, just seen. And maybe for the first time in her life, she doesn't know how to handle it. Another long silence. Then, to my surprise, my dad, who had been listening quietly, spoke up in the background. "I think she's right," he said. His voice was low, uncertain. But it was the most honest thing I'd ever heard him say. And that was it. No big meltdown, no tearful apology. But the denial cracked. The performance dropped. They finally saw it. Later that month, Zara was quietly moved to a different team with reduced responsibilities. No announcement, no celebration. Just a quiet restructuring, one that mirrored what I had experienced, except she got the benefit of privacy. And honestly, that was fine. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And for the first time in my life, it didn't live in my body alone. Other people saw it now, felt it, named it. It wasn't Kaya versus Zara anymore. It was clarity versus illusion. And clarity finally won. When you've spent your whole life trying to earn a seat at someone else's table, there's a moment, a quiet, earth-shifting moment, when you finally realize you can build your own. And that it's not selfish to walk away from people who refuse to see you. It's sacred. That moment came for me a few weeks after everything settled. Zara had been reassigned. The buzz around her quiet demotion faded. My parents went back to pretending things were normal, occasionally texting me updates about the family as if nothing had happened. But I had changed, and once you wake up, you don't go back to sleep. I stopped hoping for validation from people who only clapped when it benefited them. I stopped chasing the illusion that one day my parents would suddenly become who I needed them to be when I was 12, or 22, or 32. Instead, I chose me. Not out of bitterness, not out of ego, but out of wholeness. I sat down and wrote a list, not of goals, but of truths, things I now knew, without doubt. My value doesn't require anyone's agreement. Boundaries are not punishments. They're protections. Just because someone loves you doesn't mean they know how to treat you well. Choosing peace sometimes means walking away from those who confuse chaos with closeness. I never needed to compete. I only needed to exist fully. I kept that list on my phone. I read it when I started to feel that old guilt creeping in. The guilt that said, maybe you're being cold. Maybe you should fix it. Maybe it's still your fault. But I knew better now. I knew that walking away from dysfunction wasn't betrayal. It was returning to myself. I still speak to my family sometimes. Holidays, birthdays. But the dynamic is different. I don't over-explain. I don't fill in the silences with apologies or reassurance. I don't shrink. When my mom called me recently to ask if I was ever going to really forgive Zara, I took a breath before answering. I did forgive her, I said, but forgiveness doesn't mean closeness. It means I let go of expecting her to be different. It was quiet on the other end. And I'm not angry anymore, I added, but I am done pretending. That's the thing about reclaiming your voice. Once you start speaking the truth, anything less feels like self-abandonment. I wasn't willing to go back to that version of myself, the one who smiled through disrespect, who clapped for other people while quietly mourning her own erasure, who made herself likable at the expense of her truth. She got me here. She survived, but she's not the one who's leading anymore. Now I make decisions based on what aligns with my values, not with someone else's comfort. At work, I advocate for people who have been overlooked. I speak up when I see credit not being given where it's due. I remember what it felt like to sit in the back of the room holding the brilliance no one bothered to ask about, and I make sure no one else sits there alone. I lead differently because I lived differently. And as for Zara, she hasn't apologized. Not really. But I no longer need her to. Because I'm not standing in her shadow anymore. I'm standing in my light. And that's the difference. The resolution didn't come with a dramatic apology, a grand reconciliation, or a perfect family photo. It came with this. Me, standing in my own life, with clarity, boundaries, and a voice that no longer asks permission. And that is more than enough. Healing doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like waking up on a Saturday and not feeling dread in your chest. It looks like drinking your morning coffee slowly, without your mind rehearsing conversations that never happened. It looks like silence that feels like peace, not punishment. That's what my future started to look like. Not a dramatic reinvention, not some overnight glow-up, just rebuilding. One honest brick at a time. After everything with Zara, the HR fallout, and my parents' refusal to own their part in the story, I knew I couldn't build a better life using the same blueprints I was raised with. So I started small. I bought a home. Not a mansion, not a status symbol. Just a cozy house with wide windows, a quiet backyard, and enough space for everything I once thought I had to shrink to fit into. It felt like claiming land inside my own life. I planted things, flowers, herbs, real roots. There's something healing about putting your hands in the soil and watching something grow, especially when so much of your past was about pretending something wasn't dying inside you. Inside that home, I made rules, not for others, but for me. No over-explaining. No shrinking to make someone else feel big. No keeping the door open for people who walked in only to rearrange your furniture. It wasn't loneliness, it was solitude. A kind of fullness I had never experienced when I was chasing validation. Professionally, things flourished. My team thrived. Not just because of our results, but because of the culture we created. One rooted in respect, integrity, and honest recognition. People felt safe around me. Heard. Encouraged. And the irony? The kind of leader I became. The one who lifted others, who created space, who credited where credit was due, was the exact kind of support I'd always wished someone had been to me. I mentored younger women in the industry, interns who felt invisible in meetings, who were told to tone it down, or who feared speaking up because someone louder would always steal the credit. I looked them in the eye and said what I once needed to hear. Your voice matters. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need to be liked to be respected. And then I made sure they had the mic. Because building the future wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people coming after me too. Socially, I rebuilt my circle with care. My Friday nights became slower, softer. Dinner with friends who knew the full story and loved me anyway. Book clubs that actually talked about the book. Laughter that didn't come at anyone's expense. No more explaining myself in rooms that never saw me. No more pretending to enjoy company that left me emptier than before. And while my relationship with my parents stayed surface level, I no longer let that define me. I stopped mourning what they couldn't give. I started celebrating what I'd given myself. Self-trust, self-worth, self-ownership, and, for the first time in my life, self-love that wasn't conditional on being useful, quiet, or convenient. Sometimes I still get texts from Zara. Nothing big. A forwarded meme. A one-word response to a post. Polite things, careful things. I don't block her, but I also don't open the door wide. That boundary is a gift to me. I used to believe healing meant returning to the people who hurt you and building something new together. Now I know healing sometimes means planting new roots far away and letting those people decide if they want to walk toward you the right way, slowly, honestly, and with their own shovel. I'm not waiting. I've already started building. And this life? It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's mine, fully, finally. I never expected an apology. Not really. I think that's part of what healing teaches you. Not to expect closure from people who live in denial. You stop waiting for the big cinematic moment, the tearful reckoning, the suddenly self-aware sister or parent who says, "I finally understand what I did to you." But life has its own strange timing. It came on a random Wednesday. I had just finished wrapping up a team debrief when I checked my phone and saw the message. Zara's name. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. Her message was short. I've been thinking about things. I know I hurt you. I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'd like to listen this time. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, not out of indecision, but because I was surprised by what I didn't feel. No adrenaline, no panic, no racing thoughts, just stillness. And a quiet voice inside that said, "You're allowed to decide what happens next." A year ago, I would have dropped everything for that message. I would have run toward her with open arms and shaky boundaries just to keep the peace. I would have tried to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. But now, I took a breath, and I waited. 3 days later, I replied, "Thank you. I appreciate the message. I'm still healing. I'm not ready to dive into everything, but I'm open to a slow, honest conversation, as long as it's not about defending the past, but understanding it." She responded within minutes. "That's fair. I'll follow your lead." And she did. It started with a short call. We talked for 20 minutes. She didn't deflect. She didn't minimize. She didn't pretend. She admitted she had taken the idea, that it was intentional. That part of her always felt competitive with me, like she had to prove something, even if it meant hurting me. I asked her why. She paused and said, "Because you always seemed to have it together. You didn't need people the way I did. I thought, if I could just win once, maybe they'd love me like that." It landed like a bruise, not because I believed it, but because I understood it. Zara wasn't evil. She was a product of the same broken system. A system that taught both of us that worth was something we had to fight for, not something we were born with. That conversation didn't solve everything. There were long pauses, some tears, a few places we didn't go because the scar tissue was still too thick. But it was a start. Not a restart of our old relationship. A start of something new. Something smaller. Slower. Conditional. I no longer opened every message right away. I didn't make space I didn't have. I didn't pretend everything was fine. But I also didn't shut the door completely. I let it stay cracked, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because I chose to. And that's what made the difference. The power was mine now. Zara visited once, months later. She asked if she could see the house. We sat on the porch, sipping tea, talking about work and therapy and all the stuff in between. When she left, she hugged me, not tightly, not dramatically, just real. And for the first time, it didn't feel like she was trying to win. It felt like she was trying to understand. That's the thing with reconciliation. It's not a destination. It's a daily decision, a boundary you re-choose, a hope you hold lightly without giving it the keys to your peace. And while I don't know where our relationship will go from here, I do know this. Whatever happens next, it will happen on my terms. Some endings aren't explosive. They don't come with applause or revenge or that perfect "you'll regret this" line in a hallway. Some endings look like this: a quiet Sunday morning, bare feet on a warm wooden floor, the sound of birds, not your own thoughts, filling the room, the realization that you're no longer waiting for someone to change in order to be okay. That's what peace feels like, and that's where I live now. I don't replay the betrayal every day. I don't feel the need to rehash the past, hoping it will finally make sense. I've let go of that version of myself, the one who needed to be chosen to feel worthy, who would twist herself in knots just to avoid being misunderstood, who confused being silent with being safe. That girl? She got me here, and I honor her for surviving. But she doesn't speak for me anymore. Now I speak for me. Not for revenge. Not to be liked. But to be true. The truth is, my sister stole something from me. But I took it back. Not just the idea, not just the role, but my voice. The truth is, my parents chose comfort over clarity. They asked me to celebrate a theft because it was easier than facing the tension of fairness. But I stopped asking for fairness from people who don't even know what justice looks like. And the truth is, I'm not healed because I won. I'm healed because I let go of their rules, their roles, their rewrites of my story. I claimed my own. And in that story, I am not a victim. I am the narrator. I am the builder, the boundary setter, the one who stayed silent long enough to learn how to speak without permission. This isn't a tale about getting even. It's a lesson in getting whole. If you've ever felt like your pain was dismissed, if you've ever watched someone else wear your work, your words, your worth like it was theirs, if you've ever been told to be happy for them while swallowing your own heartbreak, I see you. And I need you to know something. You are not difficult for wanting to be treated fairly. You are not selfish for wanting space to speak. You are not broken because they couldn't love you properly. You're just done making yourself small. And that is not failure. It's freedom. I don't need to explain the ending to anyone. I don't need my family's approval. I don't even need Zara's apology to be perfect. Because I don't live in reaction anymore. I live in alignment. And every time I walk into my office or sit at my table or plant something in my garden, I'm reminded, this life, this voice, this peace, I built it. And no one can steal that from me again. Before I close, let me ask you, who did you shrink for? Who told you silence was safer? And what would happen if you stopped apologizing and started telling the truth, even if your voice shakes? Drop your story in the comments. Say the thing you've been told not to say. I'll be reading, and I'll be rooting for you, like I learned to root for myself. Because maybe the loudest revolution isn't the one that burns everything down. Maybe it's the one where you finally, fully, come home to yourself.